Hello, what is up, what is good? I am doing my weekly Shonen Jump check-in. We're talking about everything that happened in the magazine in the month of June 2024, which was a pretty eventful month for Jump. Two series got the axe and were replaced with two new series that are both about exorcists. We are truly living in the Exorcist era of Jumps, but they each had, a fairly unique little spin on it that we will talk about in due course. So let's jump in. This was a kind of rare 5-issue month, so there's a lot to cover for each series. So I'll try to kind of summarize stuff as much as I can, keep it brief, but this channel's not really about keeping it brief. So let's buckle up and start talking about Witch Watch. This month was mostly focused on stories relating to the new school year, the middle school characters joining the high school characters. The new homeroom teacher I thought was a great gimmick, that he's very clearly the protagonist of another high fantasy battle manga series, and just all the gags they had about his mysterious shady past that sometimes get subverted and sometimes live up to expectations in silly ways. And then a nice little hook into kind of the main plot. Some really touching stuff about our titular witch heading into now grade school and all the preparation that he had to do. This lovely chapter about him labeling all of her goods and materials and stuff. I don't know, it's a nice collection of things. And then the latest chapter was kind of just a pure Witch Watch chapter of really goofy kind of standalone playing on trends and stuff. Just sheer comedy. I'm just loving this series so much. I think it's just a great kind of sitcom style comedy that can shift into a lot of different modes when focusing on different characters. It's doing great. I'm happy to continue giving this an A+. Super Psychic Policeman Chojo had a very solid week, or month, I think. It's starting to experiment more with longer arcs, which I think is cool, introducing characters that have a little bit more of a substantial relationship to our main cast. A lot of chapters in this month focused on his former Yakuza rival who just got out of jail and is now trying to turn over a new leaf. His contrast with Shojo, I think, is very funny, that he is actually much more of a upstanding, noble, kind-hearted person than our supposed protagonist. That led to a lot of good comedy. There was the wrapping up of this whole kind of Sentai parody arc where Chojo was undercover and was actually liked for once. I thought that was a lot of fun. All the sort of Sentai parody stuff that they were able to do because of that. Probably my favorite chapter of the month is when they focused on fighting games, about Chojo's massive ego trip beating children at an arcade. I like that they really drove into some fighting game mechanics and stuff. You can tell that the author is clearly a fighting game player. Just sort of the level of parody that it operated on, I found very funny, very goofy. So yeah, it's been doing good. I'm giving this an A-. I think it's really building into its own as a gag comedy. As I said, I think gag comedies actually kind of take a while to really become funny, because you need a repertoire of running jokes and of character tropes, such that you can really start to experiment in a meaningful way. And I think that's what we're starting to see here, and it's hitting its stride, which is nice. Greens, unfortunately, is one of the two series that ate the bullet of Jump cancellation this month. Far too soon, it only made it into 2 volumes. I think it had a lot of potential. The author really understood the foundations of a sports manga, telling this very compelling, very relatable, but very down-to-earth story of this kid who never really took an interest in much, discovering golf and discovering that he had both an aptitude and an interest for it. I thought the characters were getting fleshed out really nicely. I liked that they really took some time to focus on the game of golf itself, spending multiple consecutive chapters just outlining hole by hole how a game is going and how he learns from hole to hole and masters different techniques. And I don't know, it felt like it had so much room to grow that it was really setting itself up for a long, compelling story of growth. And that, nothing. So the finale was fine, pretty by the book. You know, they had to just suddenly wrap things up and just sort of be like, well, my golf journey is just starting and watch me go, but you can't really. Just sort of typical sentimentality stuff, looking back at this very unfortunately scant journey. You know, it would have been cool if there was some sort of subversive thing at the end, some sort of twist to make it even more memorable. But I can understand for kind of his ongoing relationship with Jump and ongoing reputation as a mangaka. Sometimes you just kind of gotta tap it in, so to speak, and give your series a standard, competent ending. Uh, yeah, I don't know. It was fine. We can kind of speculate on maybe why it failed. I think probably the biggest thing is that a kid watching this, reading this, and going, "Hey, golf sounds pretty cool. I want to try playing golf," is actually very unlikely to be able to play golf. Maybe if it was about mini golf or something, but it's just like a very inaccessible sport for the target demographic of Jump. You know, there's a reason that most of the long-running golf manga exist in like Morning or other seinen-oriented magazines. We'll give this an A. I was very happy with this series all the way through, and I'd say the ending just totally whelmed me. It was if I was to be told, hey, this series is going to end in 2 volumes, after I read the first chapter, I probably could have predicted almost page by page the ending, which is fine. Oops, I forgot to animate this. But yeah, Psych House, I am really, really enjoying this series. It's actually reminding me a lot of Yotsuba, just in terms of like the scale of it, the focus on details around the household, just this sort of like joy of life, combining the very slice of life style joys of just getting together, having a barbecue, having a party, being considerate for one another, with similar joys around their psychic powers, you know, the joys that you can get from growing and shrinking things, the fun convenience of playing tag when you can teleport different objects in yourself. It just has like such a playfulness, and so much love is being poured into the art and the characterization and such already. I really hope this series has a long future. I think it occupies a very unique niche in Jump right now, as this very calm, pleasant, low stakes slice of life comedy. And I think it can kind of move into more emotional territory. I think there's, you know, grounds for that. If they want to have something a little more sad, a little more sentimental, they're building the emotional foundation for it now. They're making the characters endearing. You know, not every chapter is like a barn burner. It's certainly not the craziest, most exciting series. Most of the small kind of challenges and crises are met with almost a comedic anticlimax. The latest chapter I'm thinking of, where it's like, oh my gosh, we accidentally made this bee gigantic, and then he's like, nah, I counted for that. The bee's gonna shrink, and then it shrinks, and it's like, oh, I thought that was gonna be like the crisis, but okay. So yeah, I really hope this one just continues having time to cook. I'm really loving it. As I said, it's the closest thing I've ever seen in Jump to Yotsuba. This chapter especially, the cover page has him holding a big bouquet of flowers, and it reminded me of one of the very early Yotsuba chapters where Yotsuba carries a huge bouquet of flowers on her back, and I was like, ah, the spirit of Azuma is alive. As even though Azuma is also alive, Yotsuba updates so infrequently it feels like kind of a lost art or a ancient treasure. So yeah, good stuff. Roboco! This was the last series to be added in this monthly review. I only got caught up with it during June. I love this series. I love a good gag comedy. It's one of my favorite genres of manga, and Roboco is just like everything you might want from a gag comedy, I think. Insofar as it is genuinely funny, or at least I find it funny, and you know, maybe I just have like a childlike brain, but I find it very goofy and entertaining. The characters are really likable. I like this whole kind of gimmick of making them so extreme in their feelings and their ideals, and the jokes and punchlines are always like, oh, they're just so considerate, or he's such a nice guy, or whatever. You know, kind of taking the stereotypical problems that gag manga characters exaggerate into like total over the top flaws and instead going in the opposite direction. I think that's very fun. All of course balanced by Roboco herself, who is an absolute train wreck of a person. Selfish and insecure and manic and frantic and ADHD to the max. But we love her. She's also extremely endearing, and the moments where she actually does something considerate and selfless legitimately hit. They feel like very pleasant. Yeah, I don't know. I think what the series does that succeeds so well is what I've been talking about. It has built up a foundation where they can tell so many different types of stories week by week. You can have a chapter focused on Roboco trying out some latest trendy thing. You can have a chapter that's a parody of another Jump series, which they do quite often, and sometimes they get quite meta with it, but never to like an annoying extent. They can have a chapter that's just about Bondo and his buds doing kind of like childhood shenanigans, and it's very sentimental and fun and sweet. They can have a horror chapter where like the occult girl, I can't remember her name, buys some cursed item. And sometimes those are like legitimately kind of spooky, just sort of throwing in a total other sensation into the mix while still having their fair share of gags. You can have one of the excellent Roboco tries to draw her own manga parodies, which I guess is sort of parodied in itself with this Bakuman reference cover. I really love those. They're so stupid, and it's like basically the same joke every time, where she's just blatantly ripping off another Jump manga. But it always hits for me because it's just that goofy. It's just that over the top, and her bad drawings are so funny. This month, they again shifted gears into several other kind of genres or topics or whatever. This is a series very much where you can tell the author is just inserting his own interests and treating it almost as like a manga diary, which a lot of some of my favorite slice of life manga are. Like One Day Outing Foreman also operates in this mode. So here, at the request of no one, we had a 3-chapter arc about learning how to do river fishing, including all the techniques, all the protocols you have to follow, how to get your license, the different types of rod and bait. And the manga artist himself shows up and explains things to you, because obviously this is like a pet interest of his, and it's like probably the time of year that you go out fishing. I love that. I really love that. I can tell the passion that comes through it. Similarly, the latest chapter was about this shogi app you can download that the manga artist, again, just explicitly says in the manga, hey, I've been really addicted to this. You guys check it out too. And it made me want to check it out. I'm sure all the UI and stuff is in Japanese, so it would be a real pain to use. But, I like shogi. I want to get better at shogi. The only chapter this month that, kind of missed for me was the introduction of yet another kind of love interest for Bondo. In general, that kind of aspect of the story, I think, can be done sometimes, very sweetly, very fun and cute with him and Madoka. But then all of the other kind of, love triangles they're trying to form feels just sort of unnecessary, and it feels like something that isn't just perfectly ripe for comedy, because it's I don't want to see these characters suffer. I don't want to see unrequited love and pining and stuff. This is the wrong genre. So it's kind of unclear how they're hedging their bets on that sort of thing, and introducing this other childhood friend character as just eh. But it was funny enough still. So yeah, I'll give Roboco an A. I think this is just very fun, very solid gag manga. And I think it will only just keep improving as it masters more genres, introduces even more variety in what sort of stories it can tell. Good stuff. Gorilla is my favorite character. Gorilla Gachi. He's so great. I've been saying Ukuk a lot in my head because of this character. Alright, Kyokuto Necromance. I'm enjoying this one. I think it's not the craziest thing. Certainly not the most unique idea for a story that Jump has ever run. Guess what? This guy is going around exorcising spirits. What a shocker. Have you seen him before? But it's more just on the stylistic side of it. I really like how it's drawn. I really like the variety in the spirit characters. The character designs of the humans too, I think, are great. The way it depicts action, I think, is sometimes very interesting. The latest chapter had a fight scene that I found really engrossing in its depiction of like speed and choreography. There's a lot of like neat stuff going on here, and even if they're not really cooking on a mind-blowing level, I think it's solid enough, and it fills a niche of this kind of like cool urban something that like I would associate like with Bleach and stuff, where Kubo really had an eye for like the style of the whole series, and that was just as important as the actual story beats or characterization or anything like that. So yeah, I think it's succeeding on that front. I can tell they're really accelerating some stuff. It seemed like this month was starting off in a mode of like, hey, training and world building and backstory. And then maybe they got some memo from the higher ups that's like, you need to switch gears. You need to hit the gas pedal on this. And then suddenly there is a big crisis and escalation. But yeah, I'm very curious to see where it'll go. I think if they can just kind of keep up this sort of attitude, it'll find its readership. I hope it kind of stabilizes and gets the amount of fans it needs to tell a more fleshed out story. Because where these stories succeed is just introducing a lot of cool characters. Oh shit, it's all the captains of the Exorcism Squad. They've all got like crazy quirks but really cool designs. It's like the high level spirits. They're all like super freaky. Let's just see like 12 of those. You need that sort of space to world build and to bring these guys in. So I don't know. I'm hoping it'll get there. I'll give it a B plus. I think it's solid. Again, not mind blowing, but potential. All right, Kill Blue. I wasn't really feeling this series. If you go back previous months, I was mostly complaining about it. I think it's just such a ridiculous premise, and they seem to always be kind of like apologizing for and doubling back on the premise, if that makes sense, and just constantly shifting gears that they really don't seem to know what they want to be doing. And as such, you can't really get emotionally invested because everything seems to be undercutting everything else. And that's how I felt about this month in a nutshell as well. It started off, with this abandoned remote island murder mystery thing, and I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. I typically like that sort of plot line. But they moved through that phase like so blindingly quickly, and it was really just sort of the least interesting version of that sort of story, where everything just resolved itself super fast. And then, completely unrelated to that, this other crisis happens where now they're trapped doing these sort of like inane escape room scenarios and now just battling security robots, and every escalation just seems like a total tonal disregard for everything that's happening before. And it's like, oh, you think it's a fun adventure? Their lives are in danger. Oh, you think this is like a variety of like skill sets being tested and it's kind of interesting because you see the no, they're just gonna fight some robots. And it's like, it's the variety undercuts severity, and then the severity undercuts the fun of the variety, and they're just so kind of wishy-washy. The latest chapter ended on this like weird bombshell cliffhanger thing, and already I was just like, this is gonna be something stupid, and that's not how you want your manga readers to be feeling. Just kind of this exasperation where every development is like, oh, really? So yeah, I don't know what I would recommend for this series to do. I think they need to just kind of quit thinking they're both Witch Watch and Yozakura family and Sakamoto Days all at once, and like pick a lane and really try to get into the groove of something. So I'll give this a C plus. Again, it could be worse. There's a lot of aspects of it that I think are decently done. I think the art style is very fun. I think the character designs are fun, but it's just like not quite landing for me. Astro Royale, though, is another series I was complaining a lot about that I think is actually starting to hit its stride. It's not like, ooh, he was listening to me. No, obviously not. But I did basically outline what I wanted to see, and then I saw it in this month, wherein I just wanted them to not try to make everything this like extremely emotional, we're brothers but we're fighting, and remember all those times we shared, and isn't this like the most brutal, heart-wrenching thing? Because it's not. We're less than 10 chapters in, and you're telling me that I'm supposed to be like on the edge of my seat about this battle between brothers. I don't know who these motherfuckers are. So I was like, let's do something, that isn't so plot heavy, that has sort of some levity to it, that lets us see kind of the personalities of the characters and get a little endeared to them. And that's what they delivered on. There was a fun little multi-chapter ghost house arc where they're investigating some mysteries. Again, the supernatural powers system of the series feels pretty bland, but they are fleshing it out bit by bit and having a few little twists on it now that we kind of understand the mechanics. Similarly, there was this kind of arbitrary, and it didn't really connect to anything else, but they decide to do like an Iron Chef parody, that they're competing to cook up the best meal to help this guy recover. And I was like, that's nice. That's something that, again, endears us to these characters and makes us feel like we're kind of part of this world, and not like we missed the first 100 chapters of something and now we're reading the climax. It's, again, nothing really interesting ideas-wise is happening, but they're actually trying to build something up now. And I feel like, given Wakui Sensei's reputation, he should feel like he has the breathing room to do this. Like, I don't picture this getting canceled overnight. He just has such a strong legacy built up from previous series that they should give this guy time to cook. And he should take that time to cook and not rush us into anything. So I'll give this a B. I think big improvement from last month. I want to see more stuff in this direction. And it seems like they're going that way. Oh, man. I'm still not feeling this one. I complained about it a lot last month, and now we are heading into this ultimate Giga Climax arc that part of me still thinks they're going to undercut it on the really fundamental level just because they have so many times before, but who knows. I think the Gondaira Sensei, it's an odd name, whatever, should reread Oda's Ina's Lobbies arc, or a lot of other big battle One Piece arcs, because they kind of have the bones of it, where the characters are like physically segregated in this linked space, and everybody's gonna have like a big climactic one-on-one fight, right? And if you have this like tightness of time and space, where all of the battles are taking place on different floors of the same structure, and at the same time, you should take advantage of that and have, interference between battles. Or moreover, you should stagger things a little bit more. You shouldn't have the final big climactic battle between our main character and the main villain happening at the same time as 5 other battles that now just kind of seem inconsequential. And the other thing this allows you to do is to then cut between one big climactic battle and then other things that are like setting up future battles. People running to where they're going to fight something, or the other villains kind of commingling among themselves and building up some sorely needed character for these antagonists. Something that isn't just sort of like, wait, what is happening with this other battle? Because if you focus on 3 chapters on like one battle, and you know that 4 other battles are happening at the same time, when you cut to them, it's just sort of like, well, do I care about this? Like, it's just sort of been happening. Is there food here? Yeah. Yay. Can you just bring me mine if I'm still talking?
Yeah. I need to interrupt your video.
No, that's fine. I was just yapping about some poorly done major climactic battle arcs.
Oh yeah, this manga looks bad. Go read Akane.
Read Akane. We'll talk about Akane soon enough. But yeah, I don't know. It devalues the consequentialness if you're trying to do all this stuff in parallel. And moreover, I think you have to like be very careful about to say, oh, one of these 5 battles, or actually a couple of them, but some of them have major emotional backstories, where it's not just going to be fighting, but we're going to have like revelations on the pasts of the characters and stuff. To just throw that in there as well, and to have like substantial flashbacks in the middle of all these fights. It's like a distraction within a distraction, and it makes the whole thing just feel so belabored. And again, just like really reducing the feeling of consequentialness. Because once we cut back to a chapter or a fight that we haven't seen in like 12 chapters, how can we possibly be engaged, you know? I don't know. So, yeah. Again, it's like, I sounded very negative, but it could be a lot worse. I think some of these fights are actually quite interesting, and the backstory with Kengo and his teacher is kind of interesting as well, albeit very cliche. And some of the revelations we're getting about the main bad guy scheming and why he's doing everything, again, it's like kind of interesting. It's not the most interesting thing I've ever read, but there's like ideas to it. It's a bit compelling. I want to see what happens, blah, blah, blah. It's just that they're not doing themselves any favors with this formatting. You know, like, you can just write it harder, try harder to think of the schema of the overall arc, and not just have it be there's 5 fights happening at once. I think there's even more than 5. Let's see. It's the eldest sister versus Cat Girl, army tank man versus buff dude, hacker girl and Nano versus the other hacker guy, Kyoshiro versus the president of the Assassination League thing, and main character versus Asa. So I guess there's just 5, yeah. Am I forgetting one? See, the fact that I could easily forget one is part of the problem here. Anyways, yeah, it's not doing themselves any favors. Okay, Blue Box, though. I loved this month of Blue Box. Shifting fully back into the sports focus from the romance focus that we had the month previous. This had the long-awaited nationals for our main badminton player guy, Taiko? Taiki, yeah. I don't want to spoil too much about, you know, the actual results of the nationals, but the way it was depicted was so refreshing to me, because the results didn't matter anywhere near as much as the focus on, like, how they were feeling in the match. How did they feel going into it? What was the significance of this? You know, what does it feel like for the graduating players? What does it feel like for our main guy, his first shot at the big leagues? How does it feel for Yusa, his eternal rival, who is doing very well in the nationals? And how is he preparing? And how does all of this hit him? You know, even though there was depiction of badminton, and like always in the series, it was very riveting and had elements of strategy and a lot of passion put into it. Just this focus on kind of the... Oh my god, my fire alarm's going off! Yes, okay. The fire alarm went off. Hopefully I cut out all the beeping and stuff, and then we had dinner, and now I'm back. And I'm trying to remember what I already said about Blue Box. They did the nationals and kind of the aftermath of the nationals. I was very impressed with this sort of refreshingly holistic perspective they took on it, where it wasn't just about the results of the actual gameplay. And to the extent that they showed the gameplay, it was only kind of a motivator of this broader, more meaningful picture of the role badminton plays in all of their lives. What really stood out for me, a chapter that actually moved me to tears, was the one where he really contemplated how much his mom did for him, how much support she'd given him over all of his training, looking after so many things for him so he could just focus, giving him the opportunity in the first place to learn badminton and to play on a team. I found that just incredibly moving. It was, you know, so beautifully depicted, such, you know, wholesome, warm emotions. Just the sort of stuff that I always expect from this series, that I really enjoy in this series, but typically in the context of, like, romance or friendship. And to just examine this kind of often overlooked aspect of these sports manga, the role of the parents and how precious that relationship is, and just that feeling of appreciation. It really, really moved me. I think it was really well done. I think this was a great, great month for the series. Again, it's like kind of surprising. If I had predicted how the Nationals arc would go, I thought it would be really, really intense chapters focused on the outcomes of the games themselves, but they came at it from a completely different angle, and I was very, very impressed and moved by that. So I'll give this an S minus. Major move into the negative with this one. Niue's Exorcist has not been fun for me. They'd had this really kind of boring, lazy training arc that accompanied a very trite and uninteresting backstory for a character that really hasn't done much up until this point, and continues to be very kind of bland and uninteresting, because, surprise, surprise, the big demon thing that killed her former fiancé just so happens to attack them right after he'd heard about that whole backstory, which I'm not even going to, like, criticize that as bad writing per se, because these sorts of cliche coincidences is really, like, the lifeblood of shonen. But still, it was just so devoid of ideas, so devoid of anything subversive or interesting or emotionally resonant for me, just because it was so cliche and so just like phoned in on every level. And then the fight scene itself, I thought, was just completely uninteresting, just kind of working through the motions of all these cliches of, you try to fight me, I got hostages. Oh, she saved the hostages. Wow. But, you know, this one thing from your training is kind of overlapping with the fight, and wow, you're, like, good at it because you trained it. Sure. Like, it's stuff that's become cliche because there's, like, function to it, but if you're not going to do anything new, if you're not going to, like, really expand at all on just the beats that have been set out by dozens and dozens of battle shonen before you, just, like, what's the point? Like, what are we doing here? And the way the fight escalated and he unlocked new forms and stuff, I just was kind of rolling my eyes, because it's just all so trite. It's just all so shallow. Blech. At least it seems like it's over. Again, I think, like, there's ways to make this sort of story more interesting if there had been a little bit more of, like, cutting back to training and certain sort of things being foreshadowed, or fake retroactive foreshadowing where before he does something he remembers in training, understanding some, like, clarity into, like, higher powers or something. But no, it's treated as if this is, like, a totally unprecedented, not even he knew that he would be able to do this sort of thing. So then it's just like, what was the point of all that training? The whole training arc up until now was clearly, like, insufficient, and he needs to make this other, like, miraculous leap. So it just sort of feels like we've been running around just doing nothing. To me, the only interesting part of the story is the titular Niue, and kind of the circumstances around her binding and unbinding her and blah blah blah. The greater kind of plot beats. But, like, this isn't even consequential into that. We haven't seen Niue, I don't think, all month, or maybe very briefly, and the development there is, like, so kind of tangentially related to what's happening now. Like, if they beat this guy, that doesn't really get them one step closer to anything. They just have to beat him because he showed up and attacked them and attacked this hospital. You know? So it all just feels like a waste of time, where it's just so performatively about the senpai character's backstory, but, like, why do I care? Why do I care? All I just kept thinking is, why do I care? So this continues to receive a D-. Nothing interesting happened this month at all. And then shifting gears just as drastically back into the positive. Akane-banashi was amazing this month. I think it just really dove into what makes the series so great, with the Shinichi promotional exam of Akane's senpai. His name is Makieru, I believe. Something similar to that. I think the roller coaster of his performance, which took up pretty much this whole month, and was given so much space to breathe, to have kind of multiple arcs within it, to have this the pain and cringeworthiness of the way it started, into that slowly dawning on you feeling of understanding the depth of his technique and what he was really aiming for from the start. The whole arc of Afro Sensei, his biggest critic, and his moment of realization around this too, into the latest chapter where we finally see the results. I was so moved. I was so blown away. This made me understand the art of Rakugo on yet another deeper level. It just sort of made me understand storytelling on another level. The way that kind of like this genre shift emerges throughout his story made me really reflect on like a lot of narratives, on a lot of classes of narratives. And of course, it was depicted so beautifully with Akane's signature style, where you're brought in to the world of Rakugo, and then simultaneously brought into his world of memories, as he defined the style, as he decided what kind of Rakugo performer he was going to be before the disastrous expulsion event, his relationship with Akane's father. All of this being woven together, all of this being brought to bear in the performance itself, It's not just that he's, like, remembering something, and then there's, like, a gap where that just gets converted into generic, I'm gonna try hard energy, which is what we typically see in kind of, like, sports series and stuff, or really any kind of competition series. Whereas here, it's like those feelings, those memories are what is being depicted in his performance, Like, that's just so good. It's so moving. It's so cool and interesting. And just this idea of an art form where you can bring that all to bear, where you're telling a story that everyone knows, but you can still bring every aspect of your soul. Every inch of it gets squeezed into your performance, I think, is what makes Rakugo so amazing and so interesting. I'm happy to give this an S. I think at first I was like, well, this isn't Akane. This isn't our girl. So maybe there's like a ceiling on how much I would care about this. It's not like he's even that major of a character. But the way they kind of just wove so many different areas of importance and relevance into this, I was blown away. And I'm so happy they took as much time as they did on this. I think this is a really standout arc. And as I said last month too, this is what builds the world in a competition series like this, is that now we've had a full immersive display of a master Rakugo, somebody at the highest echelon of craft and ability. And it's like, we can see the gap between him and Akane. We can understand, how much she has to work and how much room there is for her to improve in her own ways. And that's really exciting. That's something that I think just enlivens the whole future of this series with such a gleeful anticipation. So yes, very, very, very happy with Akane this month. RuriDragon, we got 2 chapters, which I think is probably going to be pretty typical for this series. It is published at a very sporadic rate, I think still due to health issues around the author, which is also what led to it going on like a 2-year hiatus before this semi-recent return. But I'm still loving it. It's sort of a counterpart to something like Psych House, where it's very slice of life, very down to earth, very low stakes, with kind of a supernatural element serving as the conceit and the premise. But the emotional tone is very, very different. This one is like so sincere it hurts, going through all the turbulence of emotions, these strenuous relationships, the challenges she's having, and making connections and learning about herself. It's very honest. It's, there's no real idealization here. Things are awkward, things are painful. She stumbles when she tries to connect to people. She makes goofs, she makes mishaps. But I think in light of that, the affection that is given to her, the friendships that she does build, the moments of warmth, like in the first of these 2 chapters where she gets all distraught because her club. She's serving on the advisory committee for the sports fest, and that takes a long time. So she's late to like the study session that's being held for her so that she can catch up on class. And she feels so bad that she's late, and she's like frantically rushing over there. But then they're so understanding, and they're like, yeah, we don't care. We were just waiting. Like, we were just hanging out and talking. Like, you don't have to be so apologetic. You know, you're our friend, so of course we want to spend time with you. And just this kind of like refreshing reasonableness and how that kind of washes over her anxieties and stuff that were just piling up in her head, I thought was really, really nice. And I think that's just sort of a consistent theme in this series, is building up all these tough emotions and then being released not through some magnanimous, you know, benevolent act of total selflessness, but just through reasonable levels of friendship. You know, bringing it all back down to earth and realizing that people will just get along with you. It's really, really nice. And just this ongoing arc with that girl that really doesn't like her, doesn't like our poor Ruri, and how they're coming to understand each other has continued on in a way that I find really satisfying. So yeah, good stuff. Give this an A. Very solid month. I just hope the author can continue to improve in health and put out even more chapters, because I'm loving it. One Piece. Crazy month for One Piece. I don't really need to get into it. You can watch my reaction videos. I feel like that is the appropriate amount of time to spend on a series that after decades is now hitting such huge strides. I mean, it's always been hitting strides, but in these like really climactic moments where big bombshells that have been built up for years and years and years are now coming to fruition. Questions we've had for decades are being answered. I think it's like rising to that occasion just tremendously. There's some really big twists this month. Again, just a really cathartic mixture of things that you kind of saw coming, that you knew there would be some answer for, that have a just very satisfying conclusion, to other stuff that is like totally off the wall, totally unexpected. That we're still kind of reeling from, we're still trying to figure out what's happening, that just sort of speaks to how many surprises there is still going to be along the way, that I'm sure even up until the last chapter, we're still going to be guessing, we're still going to be having our socks knocked off. Yeah, this is my favorite manga of all time. Like, there's no doubt about it. I'm not really ever going to be able to, I think, take an impassionate, distanced critique of the whole thing, because I've been reading it and loving it since I was like 10 years old, and I can picture the 10-year-old self within me just still jumping up and down with joy at the prospect of finding out what is the One Piece, what is the will of D, what is at the end of the Grand Line. And these are questions that will be answered someday. Like, we are truly moving into the end game. I feel like I'm roughly just going to say the same thing every single month when it comes to One Piece. So yes, this also gets an S. Just phenomenal stuff. Egghead has been such a godly arc, and I'm so excited to see what's next. Dear Anemone, this was another series that met the axe last month. I kind of saw it coming. It just was not a congruent fit with Jump. I could really easily picture kids just kind of getting freaked out and upset at the art style and the grotesquities, and just having like a lot of bad vibes emanating from the series, which is too bad. I think the art style was really gorgeous, very unique. I think they certainly had some interesting ideas for character designs, and this idea of like mutation, and this idea of taking kind of strange real world animals like chameleons or box jellyfish or whatever, and then exaggerating their powers to create these sorts of monsters. That in itself is like a fine premise. I think the problem is that it tried to do all these things and be so bold in its presentation, while also, and I guess this is sort of the feeling of like hedging their bets, we gotta make it like a battle shonen too. So there has to be fights, there has to be like a power system, there has to be a sense of like power hierarchy. And there has to be like good ideals of camaraderie and selflessness, and the main character has got to have this guy he looks up to that he's looking to find, and all these pleasant flashbacks of him standing up for him, and all this very like cliche, jump type stuff that I think was added to make it more palatable to the Jump audience. I don't think they should have done that. I think if you're gonna do something this weird in Jump, you got to go whole hog, because it was that mixture, that juxtaposition that I just found so like underwhelming and so deflationary. That you'd have this like weird, grotesque build up, and then they just fight, and it was just like a normal fight. And you'd have something kind of horrific, like a kid getting mutilated and killed in the first chapter. But then he comes back, and he's like kind of like a good guy. And I don't know, it just was this feeling of kind of hedging their bets. So I hope Matsui Sensei just goes whole hog somewhere else. I don't think this magazine is a good fit for this sort of art style or this sort of idea. Just make like a crazy horror manga somewhere else. I know that's what they got. That's what they're itching to do. Just let it all out. I'll give this a C. The ending especially, I think, had the worst aspects of trying to hedge their bets this way, in that it was like your typical "and their journey continues" ending that we see in a lot of early cancellations, that we saw in Green Green Greens, but with just this weird, like, sentimental, hopeful attitude that was totally at odds with all of the grotesquity and violence we'd seen up until that point. And it just made the whole thing feel like very flat, very statementless. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is one of the two new Exorcist-themed series replacing the two wholly unique series we got before. And I certainly feel some type of way about that. That really seems like the Jump editorial team maybe going a little too heavy on safe bets. But to their credit, this and the other new series we'll talk about are not typical Exorcist battle series that I expected, but have, their own kind of twists and turns. This is definitely the more unique of the two. This is just straight up a gag comedy with an Exorcist theme. We have our main character here, who is an amateur exorcist. She wants to go around sealing yokai into cards, but she is a total coward and freaks out and knows all of these scary stories about yokai that she can't just get out of her head when she actually encounters them. Luckily, she has her buddy here, who is evil. Well, not really evil per se. He's very mean. And basically the whole series is him like trolling and roasting yokai. That they encounter the Kappa in the first chapter. And as she explains to him all of the myths associated with the Kappa, which the Kappa also is trying to back up bolsterously and freak him out, he just points out all of the logical inaccuracies. Oh, you can't get the thing on the top of your head wet? That's stupid. You're just exposing this massive weak point, and that means you can't leave the river. Why would anyone go near the river? How are you supposed to capture anyone? Just going on and on like this, and they kind of just iterate through all of the different associated myths with each yokai, and one by one he points out how illogical they are, or how stupid they are, or how perverse they are, or how non-threatening they are, until the yokai is so demoralized that it surrenders itself and has no energy to fight back, and then she seals it. And it's basically about this team going around sealing different yokai. And to me, that's a great premise. I really like that. I like learning about the different yokai. I like that they go beyond just sort of surface level depictions and really delve into the more obscure related myths and legends and stuff, some of which are just really bizarre and definitely something that doesn't really make sense in the modern day. Each one of them is sort of themed as well, like with the Tengu. He just keeps referring to modern appliances that can do everything the Tengu does, but better, and how the Tengu is totally obsolete now. So that kind of theming, I think, is quite fun. Also, in the latest chapter, they kind of switched it up a little bit by having him not just roast a yokai, but roasting this other exorcist that comes along that is, obviously not as foundational a myth or fairy tale as a yokai tale, but she's like a very cliche character that has the power of fire. And he's just pointing out, all of the like safety risks and kind of logistical nightmares that entail trying to use fire in like a suburban battle and being like, what hold it, was that a flaming sword? Are you serious right now? You're gonna start swinging a flaming sword around? You're gonna catch that tree on fire. Like, I like that, really kind of reducing it down to earth, you know, really reinforcing the setting that they're just in probably like suburban Tokyo or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that I like. I worry that the premise will run thin. I don't know. I mean, there's like hundreds of yokai, but I don't know if there's hundreds of yokai that could hold up to this level of scrutiny and this sort of like writing, and still be funny and still be interesting. And maybe the shtick will just get old, but it seems like they're willing to like mix it up and have some other elements as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's potential here. I'm gonna give it a B plus. Again, I think it takes a little while for a gag series to really truly become funny. This one has kind of more of a complete premise in and of itself. It's not just like character-based humor or like sitcom-y humor. But I think it'll get even stronger if it can kind of incorporate more of those elements. But yeah, not bad. Certainly more interesting than I thought it would be. Oh, I forgot to animate this one as well. Oh well. JJK only ran one chapter this month. I think Akutami-sensei is ill. Very unfortunate. And part of me wanted to just like leave it off as if it didn't run at all this month because it just ran one chapter of like 8 pages. But I don't know. We can still talk about those 8 pages. They were pretty interesting. You know, this gigantic climactic fight is continuing with all sorts of little twists and sub-twists and stuff. And it left it on a note that I was very intrigued by. I think, you know, this fight is going to get more interesting before it ends, which is an exciting prospect. So I'll give it a B+. I don't know. It's hard to grade, but it's solid. We can just move on, though. That's it. Undead Unluck, launching full-heartedly into this idol arc, which I don't want to explain in depth because it's a lot of spoilers, but they're basically taking this whole idea of time loops to the next level and throwing in some kind of like Back to the Future-esque mechanics where even though they are rampantly changing this timeline from any other, there's certain elements that they need to preserve as well, which is accumulating in this big idol showdown battle. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in preparing for this. The idea of getting all of these presumably tone-deaf and coordinated characters ready to sing at a concert was a lot of fun. But overall, I just kind of felt like this one moved a little too fast and kind of just like threw in a bunch of stakes that kind of made it feel a little more disjointed and convoluted than it needed to be. Like, I think what the series does really well is that it keeps shifting genres, but it shifts genres very decisively, and then it makes sure to localize all the stakes within the trappings of that genre. Okay? So when they had, like, the war arc, which we can see on the cover here, they made it so that the consequence you care about most is the outcome of that battle that unfolds while they obviously have other goals as well. It made you, like, care about that. Or, like, the school life arc or, you know, whatever. This arc, though, it feels like the actual idol activities are somewhat secondary and sort of, like, rushed through. And it was more just about the setup and then more about these external stakes of, you know, the actual bad guy team is getting directly involved to an unprecedented degree and all of this stuff to, like, maintain certain aspects of continuity. It just sort of feels like it's getting pulled in a few different directions, and as a result, it's feeling a little more rushed than I would have liked. Basically, I wanted to see at least a chapter of just full-on, like, idol performances and really try to capture the spirit of, like, an idol series. And maybe I'm in a minority opinion here. Maybe other people would have been, like, bored or whatever by that. But again, I think that's the great strength of the series, is to be able to really have a fleshed out version of this genre that you just shift into and then shift out of. So I'll give this an A. Like, it wasn't bad or anything. I'm still obviously loving this series a lot. But I just think other arcs have been stronger on that front. Kagurabachi. Last week I was saying I was feeling kind of lost in the sauce when it came to this arc. That it just sort of felt like they were introducing so many elements, and that it was sort of getting away from like the core caring about the main character, caring about the main premise, into just having to care about this like family drama and the mechanics of their specific powers and this legacy of the auction and all these different things. And I just felt a little but I got a few comments of people that were like really into the arc and really enjoying it, so I reread it from the start. And now that I kind of see like the significance of where stuff was going, it was easier to get myself invested in all this stuff. Which, you know, I think that's fine. Like, I think that's the way manga artists should write, especially when they're writing a more substantial arc, especially if it's the first one in the series, is you gotta have some faith in the readers. You gotta have some sense that eventually this will be enjoyed in tankobon form, you know, with focus, with intent, and really allow yourself to like dive into these different stories if that's what you want to do. So I was enjoying it more on the reread, and then I was really enjoying just this month's chapters too, because this is where everything starts coming together, and a lot of different elements that were introduced start getting paid off. I'm gonna grab a bottle of water. And not just paid off in terms of like oh, now this guy's fighting, now this guy's fighting, but in terms of like little mechanical details and the specific way things were set up to work with the various powers and stuff now become like really plot relevant, and some really surprising cathartic things are happening because of that. So that really impressed me. It looks like we're moving into the climax of this arc, which is fine by me. As much as I'm enjoying it, I'm much more interested in just what else the series can do, I guess, which maybe sounds rude to this arc, but I'm really curious where this series is going to go, in terms of expanding out the world, in terms of what the characters' goals are after this and all of that. So yeah, I don't know, good stuff. I'll give it an A-. Very solid arc writing. It kind of came together for me. I just love this whole storeroom concept, the powers around the storeroom and all the different tricks and counter tricks they're using with it has been really engrossing and has led to good fight scenes. So yeah, I don't know. See what's next. Sakamoto Days this month has been pretty interesting. You know, we had a very substantial arc that ended, and now we're in that sort of very rich territory of between arcs. You know, I talk a lot about my conception of modern shonen, and I think a hallmark of modern shonen is that the space between arcs is just as interesting or even more interesting than the arcs themselves. Just having the opportunity to like take a step back and let the world breathe and let new things develop, new characters get introduced, you kind of see how other things are developing. And I think they really seized that well. They introduced some very interesting characters, set up some expectations around their powers and their power levels and the threats they might represent. They set up a potentially very long kind of like saga, with Sakamoto coming up with a new goal that may kind of be the ultimate solution to a lot of problems in his life that I was very, very excited by. And then they start to kind of unravel a few mysteries that were set up in this last arc, that I'm pretty satisfied with. I don't know. I could see this also being seen as kind of like ass-pulley or silly. It's definitely one of the strangest elements of the series so far. But I'm kind of into it. I think it's a good way to kind of build up this villain as like a almost otherworldly entity, something kind of beyond the understanding of anything else. And some good fight scenes too. You know, I think this series is great at, even if they're going to have more lore-heavy chapters, more setup-heavy chapters, they find opportunities to deliver that action choreography that makes this series so fantastic. So yeah, overall very good. Looking forward to more. I'll give it an A+. I just think very solid in all regards, but not hitting the absolute highs that the series has before. This was the other new Exorcist series of this month. This one, on its surface, is a lot more cliche battle shonen-y than Yokai Buster Murakami or whatever it's called. This one is just about a really, really strong exorcist. The strongestest exorcist in the world. The ultimate exorcist, in fact, who trivially neutralizes all demonic threats, but is handicapped by the fact that he is a huge coward and oversleeps and gets lost and is just in general sort of like a sloppy person. We've seen it all before. That in itself is not that interesting. Then they introduce some very comedic elements kind of around this, where in the first chapter at least, there's like a long sequence where he's just talking to the demon he's meant to exorcise. And it turns out these demons live in a world that is essentially like our own. He's talking about like treating possessing people as like an office job and how terrible he feels being away from his family on assignment, and they end up kind of bonding, and it's all very silly and comedic. We've seen that all before too. I think at this point, a demon world that has all the hallmarks of the human world is even more cliche than a hellish, unrecognizable demon world. So that wasn't really a surprise either. And then I think the only really surprising thing is that it became more cliche. I thought it was going to be, oh, the reason he's the ultimate exorcist is because he can like talk to the demons and get them to open up, and they end up kind of allying, and they just voluntarily stop possessing people or causing problems. But no, in the end, there's a big combat thing, and he's awesome at combat too. The fight scenes are actually pretty cool, and I like the art style of this one in general. It's very fresh and lively, and I'm kind of interested to see more fight scenes. But it's a little disappointing that they're kind of like, yeah, we're subversive, we have like comedy, we have, you know, this idea of humanizing the demons, and you don't know what kind of wacky hijinks there's going to be. But in the end, it's just fighting. It comes down to fighting anyways. Like, it also seems like they are right off the bat, hedging their bets in a weird way in terms of series length, where it's like, oh, there's 13 demon lords, and you just killed one. And then, you know, spoilers, in the second chapter, he kills another one. So it's like, oh, this could get wrapped up in, like, 13 chapters. But then, of course, if it doesn't, and it's doing well, then, hey, yeah, we probably won't see another Demon Lord for, like, 20 chapters. And it's like, you know, we talk a lot about the things authors can do to kind of hedge their bets against the undeniable acts of cancellation, and to give themselves outs to have, like, a smooth ending at any point. And I think that's very interesting to discuss and to analyze. This is one of the least subtle I think I've seen, where you say, hey, there's 13 of these guys, and probably by the end of the series he's going to beat them all, but maybe he'll just beat like 4 or 5 per chapter and we're just out of here. And it just feels, you know, very transparent in a way that, again, it's like, I've seen this all before. So I'll give this a B. Not quite as interested in this as Yokai Buster, Murakami. But it's fine. Like I said, I like the art style. I like the way the fight scenes were drawn. Even though the humor was, like, very kind of cliche at this point and not really subversive, it was still funny. It was still nice. I had a chuckle or two. So yeah, we'll give it a chance. We'll see how it's doing. My Hero Academia. We had only 3 chapters. Yeah, 3 chapters this month. Out of the potential 5. And there's only going to be 4 more chapters after this. We are truly heading into the end game. Or not even the end game, but the epilogue. Last month I talked at length about how moving and cathartic it was to see this series realized, and that even though, like I said, I could have guessed pretty much every event in that final climax years and years ago, there was nothing really surprising, nothing really subversive, nothing that completely exceeded my expectations, but it certainly lived up to my expectations in a way that was very satisfying. And this epilogue is doing the same. It's very by the book. We're just kind of checking in with different characters, and they're kind of doing what we expected them to do. And that's fine. That's fine. You know, I've been reading this series for like a decade. I like these characters. I want to see them have happy endings. I want to see catharsis and resolution to their problems. I don't know. I just wish it was a little more interesting. I wish there was a few more surprises or something to kind of... I don't know how it's going to ultimately end. I imagine it's going to be a very kind of sentimental cliche ending. But they could... It would be nice if they threw in a little surprise or something. One final little twist that makes you think, ooh, there's still adventures to come or something like that. And it hasn't really happened yet. In the past, I've praised a lot the Todoroki family drama. I just found that it was actually quite well written and interesting, and even though it was like fairly cliche stories of a harsh father's demanding expectations, it was handled in a really mature way and with a lot of character depth, I thought. And those were, to me, some of the highlights of the whole series, and really spoke to something a lot further beyond kind of the normal trappings of Battle Shonen. So we had some resolution to that this week. That again was basically what I would have predicted. But nicely uncompromising, I thought. There was a few lines that I was like, correct. That they didn't wuss out and cheapen the impact of some stuff or overly redeem certain characters in a way that didn't feel unearned. So yeah, I was like impressed by it, but only to the extent that I hoped I would be impressed by it. So it's like fine, it's all good. I'll give it a B+. It's like satisfying me. They're not fumbling it. They're just kind of carrying out the series' expectations. And then finally, the Elusive Samurai. This is getting a bunch of color pages and cover treatments right now because the anime is coming up. Cloverworks is doing an anime adaptation of this. I sure hope they stick to the manga and not go off the rails like they did with Promised Neverland and Shadow's House and a few others. Cloverworks getting kind of notorious for this. But yeah, I think Cloverworks is a great studio to handle this. They're really good at this kind of lively, action-packed animation. And overall, I'm still quite enjoying this series. This latest month was battle, deep into the complexities of this battle. Multiple kind of one-on-one showdowns happening, interwoven. Some pretty emotional ones with a lot of backstory behind them. But in the end, nothing really to alleviate this pace of just battle. The latest chapter was very involved into moving troops around and relaying information in such a way to misreport the troops' positioning to the enemy general. It was like kind of interesting on an abstract level, but I found it just sort of underwhelming as well because there wasn't really anything that shocking, or there wasn't really that much like oomph to it. I think because there wasn't a sense of like, this is our desperate final plan or anything. Just more like, hey, the good guys are winning. Oh, and then they did this whole maneuver. But they're still winning. And I think this is maybe a trapping of like trying to follow the actual history of the battle too much, and this is probably some recorded events that happened during the battle. But in the flow of the narrative, it just sort of seems superfluous, and it doesn't really change our expectations, and therefore doesn't really feel that surprising or compelling as like, you know, a trick maneuver or whatever. But still, I think overall this series does battles great. Just the violence of them, the chaoticness of them, the way individual personalities can be brought to bear in these more intimate one-on-one showdowns. And all of that stuff is on display here in a way that's pretty satisfactory. So this will get an A-. This was our tier list last month, sorry. Excuse me. Oh. And this is this month's, I don't know, not too different. You can compare and contrast. Maybe there's some way, maybe I should do like plus or minus or like in brackets so you can see what's moving up and down or something like that. Anyways, that's it. We are now reading the entirety of Jump. Roboco is the last series. And as long as I have the stamina to do these every month, we are going to just be keeping up with this most illustrious manga magazine, which makes me very happy, makes me very satisfied. I find all of this stuff both just a joy to read. Even the series I dislike, I enjoy disliking them. And just really fascinating on a meta level to track all these trends and changes, follow these series as they improve and disappoint and everything in between. So yeah, join me next month when we'll talk about a bunch more chapters. Bye bye.